Saturday. The one day of the week I allowed myself the delusion that Brenda Jenkins, president for life of the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association, might spontaneously develop a hobby that didn't involve measuring the precise height of my mailbox or circulating passive-aggressive newsletters about aesthetic harmony. I was cradling a mug of coffee, the kind that could strip paint, and debugging a particularly nasty piece of code for a client who thought ASAP was a flexible time frame. Outside, the sky was doing that weird, bruised green thing it does when it's contemplating violence. My weather app chirped a polite notification. Severe thunderstorm watch upgraded to tornado watch for your area. Charming. Just another Saturday in paradise, I muttered, taking a large gulp. My cat, Schrodinger, named for his uncanny ability to be both asleep and demanding food simultaneously, flicked an ear from his perch on a stack of drone manuals. Then my inbox pinged. The subject line alone was enough to curdle milk. Urgent, unauthorized noise pollution, community siren. Sender, Brenda Jenkins, HOA president, CC'd to every poor soul in a 10-block radius. Oh, here we go? I said, Schrodinger echoing me with a world-weary meow. I clicked it open. Dear valued residents, it began, the valued already dripping with insincerity. It has come to my attention, through numerous, and I mean numerous, channels of community feedback, that the monthly noon testing of the township's tornado siren is causing undue distress and significantly disrupting the hard-earned weekend tranquility of our esteemed Pleasant Valley. I snorted. Numerous channels? You mean your channel, Brenda, broadcasting live from Planet Delusion? The email continued, a masterpiece of self-important fluff. Apparently, the siren induces anxiety in our more sensitive residents and beloved pets. I immediately pictured Fifi, Brenda's yappy, over-pampered poodle, whose main contribution to society was strategically placed landmines on my lawn. Furthermore, Brenda had typed, her prose getting more purple. In this modern age of instant mobile alerts, the antiquated nature of such a blaring, indiscriminate alarm is, frankly, anachronistic and an affront to the peaceful, technologically advanced community we strive to maintain. My internal monologue was already firing off responses. Tranquility? Lady, your collection of decorative wind chimes sounds like a robot uprising in a cutlery drawer. And technologically advanced. You still print out your Facebook posts, Brenda. The kicker was the final paragraph. Rest assured, your HOA board, under my diligent leadership, is proactively addressing this auditory imposition. We are exploring more harmonious solutions. In the meantime, we appreciate your understanding as we work towards a quieter, more serene Pleasant Valley for all. Proactively addressing? I said aloud, a cold dread beginning to prickle at the back of my neck. The green sky outside seemed to darken a shade. My phone buzzed again. Tornado warning now in effect. Radar indicates strong rotation, seek shelter. I remembered a snippet from last month's HOA meeting, a truly soul-crushing 2 hours primarily dedicated to the unauthorized color of Mrs. Henderson's azaleas. Brenda had briefly mentioned the siren. It's just so loud, she'd sniffed, adjusting her pearl necklace. Surely there's a volume knob somewhere, or perhaps we could just opt out? At the time, I'd dismissed it as peak Brenda, just another bauble of nonsense from her endless collection. But proactively addressing sounded ominous. It sounded like something Brenda would do, armed with a pair of wire cutters and an unshakable belief in her own divine right to meddle. Schrodinger jumped off the manuals and wound around my ankles, purring like a tiny, furry V8 engine. Yeah, buddy, I said, scooping him up. I've got a bad feeling about this. A very, very bad Brenda-shaped feeling. The first fat raindrop splattered against my window. Noon, or 11:58 a.m. to be precise, the moment of truth. Every first Saturday of the month, for as long as I'd lived in Pleasant Valley, 7 years of HOA-induced migraines, the tornado siren on top of the old municipal shed by the park would wail its guts out for a solid 60 seconds. A comforting, if slightly ear-splitting, reminder that, yes, we lived in an area where the weather occasionally tried to murder us, but hey, at least we'd know it was coming. I stood by my living room window, coffee forgotten, watching the rain lash down. The wind was starting to pick up, whistling around the eaves like a banshee with a head cold. My phone was practically vibrating off the table with increasingly frantic alerts from the National Weather Service. Confirmed tornado on the ground. Path indicates it will track near Pleasant Valley. Take shelter now. 11:59 a.m. Any second now. That rising, guttural moan. The one that made every dog in a 5-mile radius howl in sympathy. 12 p.m. Silence. Not a peaceful silence. Not the serene silence Brenda probably envisioned. This was a heavy, pregnant silence. The kind that presses in on you, amplifying the howl of the wind and the frantic thumping of your own heart. Okay, I said, my voice tight. Okay, maybe it's delayed. Maybe their atomic clock is off. Maybe a squirrel chewed through a wire. A really, really big squirrel. But I knew, deep in my gut, where the bad coffee and rising panic were having a cage match, I knew. 12:01 p.m. Still nothing but the storm's growing fury. I grabbed my binoculars, usually reserved for identifying the rare migratory birds Brenda claimed were endangered by my Wi-Fi signal. I focused on the small, windowless municipal shed a few blocks away, its silhouette barely visible through the sheeting rain. And there it was. Brenda Jenkins's unmistakable, offensively floral print SUV, parked at a jaunty, I own this place angle right beside the shed's access door. As I watched, the door opened, and out she bustled, clutching a small, suspiciously shiny toolbox to her chest. Her bright pink rain poncho made her look like a malevolent flamingo. She wore an expression of profound, almost beatific smugness, the kind reserved for martyrs who've just endured a particularly satisfying crucifixion. "You didn't," I whispered, lowering the binoculars. "You actually, certifiably, off your rocker did it." Brenda Jenkins, HOA president, defender of Fifi's eardrums, and champion of anachronistic quietude, had jammed the goddamn tornado siren during an active tornado warning. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. Then I looked at my phone again. The little red tornado icon on the weather map was no longer near Pleasant Valley. It was practically sitting on our welcome sign. Estimated arrival over my rooftop, 15 minutes, tops. My neighbors, lulled into a false sense of security by years of reliable siren tests, and presumably Brenda's email about harmonious solutions, were probably all blissfully unaware. Old Man Henderson was likely still trying to polish his classic Buick in the garage. The Peterson twins were probably engaged in a death-defying game of indoor Nerf basketball. And Brenda? Brenda was probably brewing herself a nice cup of herbal tea, convinced she'd single-handedly saved the neighborhood from auditory Armageddon. "That woman!" I seethed, pacing my living room, Schrödinger now hiding under the sofa, "would weaponize a potluck if she thought it gave her an edge in the perennial garden competition. She'd probably try to issue a noise violation to the actual tornado." The house gave a sudden shudder as a particularly violent gust of wind hit it. Pictures rattled on the walls. Okay, panic time was officially over. It was time for... Well, I wasn't sure what it was time for, but it probably involved a lot of batteries and a flagrant disregard for several of Brenda's meticulously crafted bylaws. Panic, as it turned out, was a remarkably effective motivator. It mixed with a strange, almost giddy sense of, well, if the universe is going to serve up this level of absurdity, who am I to refuse a front row seat and maybe a little participatory engineering? My gaze fell upon the shelves in my office, or as I affectionately called it, the drone zone. It wasn't just a hobby, it was an obsession. For the past 2 years, I, Leo Maxwell, certified tech geek and freelance custom drone solutions developer, a title that sounded way more impressive than guy who builds weird flying things in his garage, had been working on a personal passion project, a networked swarm of drones equipped with high-powered directional loudspeakers. The original concept? Honestly, it varied depending on the day. Sometimes it was for large outdoor event management targeted announcements, crowd control, finding lost kids. Sometimes it was for search and rescue in rugged terrain. And sometimes, if I was truly honest with myself after 3 cups of coffee, it was for a highly sophisticated, technologically advanced method of scaring squirrels away from my prized heirloom tomato plants. The point was, I had them. 5, to be exact. Sleek, black, bristling with custom-built tech, and currently gathering a fine layer of dust. "All right, Maxwell," I addressed my reflection in the darkened computer screen. Years of late-night coding marathons fueled by stale pizza and existential dread. Countless soldering burns that have given your fingerprints a unique, almost alien pattern. Endless hours spent explaining to bewildered dates why your living room occasionally resembles a DJI factory after a particularly aggressive pillow fight. This is your moment. Or, the moment everyone in a 5-block radius gets turned into atmospheric confetti because Brenda Jenkins thinks Fifi's delicate little eardrums are more important than, say, not being impaled by a flying picket fence. I bolted for the drone zone. Schrödinger, sensing a shift from panicked pacing to purposeful action, poked his head out from under the sofa, gave me a look that clearly said, "You're insane, but I'm vaguely intrigued," and then promptly went back to cowering. Smart cat. The checklist in my head was already running. Power up drones, check. Batteries. Oh hell, Drone 3's battery was blinking amber. Classic Drone 3. Always the drama queen. "Not now, Big Tony, not now," I muttered, swapping it for a fresh one. "Connect to control interface." My custom-coded laptop software, affectionately named Skynet Lite, because I have a sense of humor, unlike some HOA presidents I could name, flickered to life. Network handshake, green lights across the board. Yes, warning message. This was crucial. It needed to be clear, concise, and loud enough to penetrate the storm's roar and the collective obliviousness of Pleasant Valley. I started typing furiously, the text-to-speech module ready. "Tornado warning. Seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Your HOA president is a certifiable menace to public safety." Okay, maybe I'd workshop that last part. Or maybe not. Tempting. Very tempting. I settled for a slightly more professional but equally urgent version. The digital clock on my monitor glowed. 12:04 p.m. 4 minutes since I'd seen Brenda make her triumphant toolbox-clutching exit. The NWS app now showed the tornado's vortex signature practically on top of us, ETA. 10 minutes, maybe less. The wind shrieked, and the lights flickered ominously. "Showtime," I gritted out, my fingers flying across the keyboard, assigning drones their call signs for the mission. Drone 1, the fastest, became screamy. Drone 2, with the widest audio dispersal, was Howler. Drone 3, the one with the beefiest speaker and deepest bass, was, of course, Big Tony. Drone 4 became Valkyrie, and Drone 5, the smallest and most maneuverable, was Zippy. It felt like naming a suicide squad, which, considering Brenda's potential reaction, wasn't entirely inaccurate. One last thing. I snatched up my phone, dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? A calm female voice answered. Yeah, hi, I said, trying to sound less like a lunatic with a private Air Force. Leo Maxwell, 121 Oak Street, Pleasant Valley. Our town's tornado siren isn't working. It's, been unofficially decommissioned, if you catch my drift. By our HOA president, Brenda Jenkins. Yes, Jenkins. Look, there's no time to spell it. There's a massive tornado bearing down on us right now. I'm launching an alternative notification system, privately owned, just so you know, gotta go. I hung up before she could ask if my alternative notification system involved tin cans and a string. Let them figure it out. Right now, I had a neighborhood to save, and an HOA president to royally tick off. 2 birds, 1 drone swarm. My back patio door was rattling in its frame as I wrestled it open against the wind, which was now flinging rain sideways with the force of a pressure washer. Not ideal launch conditions, but ideal had apparently taken a vacation with the tornado siren. I hauled the drones out one by one, their rotors twitching in anticipation, or maybe just from the buffeting wind. "All right, my noisy little angels," I yelled over the roar, rain plastering my hair to my forehead. "Time to earn your keep! Operation Annoy Brenda and Save Lives is a go!" I retreated inside, shaking like a wet dog, and brought Skynet Lite to full operational status on my laptop, which was now perched precariously on a stack of towels on the kitchen counter, my ad hoc command center. With a few keystrokes, I initiated the launch sequence. One by one, Screamy, Howler, Big Tony, Valkyrie, and Zippy whirred to life. Their LED navigation lights cut through the gloom like angry fireflies. With a synchronized surge of power, they lifted off the patio, wobbled precariously for a moment as they fought the wind, and then, bless their little gyroscopes, stabilized and ascended. It was, I had to admit, a pretty awesome sight, even with the impending doom backdrop. I sent Screamy and Howler east, towards the denser part of the neighborhood. Big Tony went west, Valkyrie north, and Zippy south, covering the main cul-de-sacs. Then, I hit the big red virtual button on my interface labeled Make Some Noise. The first wave of sound that erupted from my laptop speakers, a slightly delayed relay from the drones themselves, was glorious. "Attention, Pleasant Valley residents," boomed Zippy's surprisingly robust voice, digitally enhanced for maximum penetration. "This is an emergency broadcast," thundered Big Tony, his bass notes probably rattling fillings. "A confirmed tornado is approaching your location," shrieked Screamy, living up to his name. "Seek immediate shelter in a basement or interior room away from windows," Howler howled. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Take cover now," Valkyrie added, her synthesized soprano cutting through the wind's moan. I had live video feeds from each drone. Through the rain-streaked lenses, I saw the first signs of confusion, then dawning comprehension. Mr. Henderson, who had, against all odds, been attempting to squeegee his Buick in his open garage, dropped his sponge, mouth agape, looking wildly around for the source of the disembodied voices. The Peterson twins, who had evidently escalated their Nerf war to the front yard, froze mid-battle, their plastic weapons clattering to the wet grass. One of them pointed skyward. Lights flicked on in houses that had been dark. Faces appeared in windows, pale and alarmed. A few brave, or foolish, souls poked their heads out of front doors, their expressions morphing from irritation to stark fear as they finally registered the menacing sky and the urgent, inescapable warnings from above. "Yeah, that's right, folks," I narrated to Schrodinger, who was now peeking out from behind the dishwasher, his tail puffed to twice its normal size. "Your friendly neighborhood tech geek, saving your bacon 1 decibel at a time. You can thank me later. Or, just pool your resources and buy Brenda a one-way ticket to a very remote, very quiet island." Then, on Zippy's south-facing camera, I saw her. Brenda Jenkins. She'd clearly just made it back to her own meticulously manicured property, probably congratulating herself on a job well done. She was halfway up her porch steps when the first chorus of drone warnings hit. Her head, swathed in that ludicrous pink poncho, snapped up. Her jaw dropped. I could almost feel the incandescent rage radiating from her, even through a grainy, rain-lashed video feed. The age of tranquility, it seemed, was over. The age of Leo's loud, annoying drones had begun, and Brenda looked pissed. Brenda Jenkins was not a woman to take aerial loudspeaker bombardments lying down, or cowering in a basement, for that matter, which is what any sane person would have been doing. Her video feed avatar, courtesy of Zippy, who was doing a slow, taunting circle over her prize-winning petunias, from a safe, FAA-approved altitude, of course, showed her stomping back down her porch steps, face a mask of puce fury. "Leo Maxwell!" Her shriek was almost audible even without Zippy's microphone, a testament to years of practice honing her outrage. She was shaking a fist at Zippy. "I know this is you. Cease and desist your illegal aerial harassment. Those aren't FAA approved for yelling. This is a direct violation of HOA bylaw 7, section C, subsection A, regarding unapproved noise generation." I couldn't resist. I patched my own microphone through to Zippy. "Brenda, for crying out loud, there's a tornado. Get inside. And for the record, these are perfectly compliant with Part 107 for daytime operations, you colossal pain in the neck." I managed to censor myself at the last second. Professionalism, Leo, professionalism, even when dealing with the architect of your potential demise. Her response was to whip out her phone. Oh, I knew that move. That was the "I'm calling the authorities and your life will be forfeit" move. Sure enough, Zippy's audio feed picked up her shrill, theatrical voice. "Officer, yes, it's an emergency. A real emergency this time. That delinquent Maxwell boy from 121 Oak Street. He's flying his infernal machines again. They're making a terrible racket. He's deliberately trying to induce panic. He's impersonating a weather alert." Pause. "A tornado? Don't be ridiculous. The sky is just a little dramatic. He's crying wolf to cover for his flagrant bylaw violations. You need to arrest him immediately and confiscate those noisy sky demons." Sky demons. I almost choked on my own spit. That was a new one. I'd have to update their official designation in Skynet Light. While she was busy trying to convince law enforcement that my drones were a greater threat than a quarter-mile-wide vortex of debris, she apparently decided to take matters into her own hands. Zippy's camera tilted downwards as Brenda disappeared into her garage, emerging a moment later, brandishing a broom. A standard straw-bristled broom. She waved it menacingly at Zippy, who was hovering a good 30 feet up. Is she trying to sweep my drone out of the sky?" I muttered, half bewildered, half impressed by the sheer audacity. The wind was now strong enough that her pink poncho was flapping around her like a sail, threatening to send her airborne herself. The broom having failed to achieve air superiority, she then grabbed a garden hose, fumbling with the nozzle, and tried to shoot a jet of water at Zippy. The stream fell comically short, mostly just drenching her already saturated, prize-winning azaleas. This was followed by a badminton racket, which she swung with surprising ferocity, but a distinct lack of aim. Each swipe was punctuated by another gust of wind and a fresh torrent of rain, making her look like some kind of bizarre, waterlogged interpretive dancer performing a ritual to appease an angry sky god. "Badminton racket," I said to Schrodinger, who had crept closer and was now watching the drone feeds with rapt attention, his whiskers twitching. "She's bringing a badminton racket to a drone fight during a confirmed tornado. This woman's cheese has not just slipped off her cracker, my friend. It's packed its bags, bought a timeshare in another dairy dimension, and sent back a postcard saying, 'Wish you weren't here.'" Meanwhile, Screamy, Howler, Big Tony, and Valkyrie were continuing their patrol, their warnings echoing through the deserted streets. People were, by and large, heeding the warnings. Lights were off, doors were shut. A few stragglers could be seen sprinting for cover. My makeshift system, as chaotic and unorthodox as it was, seemed to be working. All except on Planet Brenda, where the primary threat remained rogue aerial audiophiles. The first police cruiser, lights flashing, turned onto Brenda's street. Showtime Part 2. Two of Pleasant Valley's finest rolled up, their cruiser cutting through the driving rain like a particularly grumpy shark. I recognized Officer Miller, older, salt and pepper hair, with an air of weary resignation that suggested he'd seen one too many HOA disputes in his time. With him was Officer Davis, younger, fresh-faced, probably still believed in things like civic duty and people being reasonable. Poor kid was in for a rude awakening. The wind was a howling beast now, flinging leaves and small branches around like confetti at a very angry wedding. The sky was a truly apocalyptic shade of greenish-black. My drones, bless their little lithium-ion hearts, were still airborne, though Zippy was reporting some turbulence issues. Their synthesized voices, now slightly distorted by the wind, were still blaring. "Warning! Tornado imminent! Seek shelter!" Brenda, spotting the arriving cavalry, abandoned her badminton-based anti-aircraft efforts and practically flung herself at their car before it had even fully stopped. "Officers, thank heavens!" she shrieked, her pink poncho plastered to her, making her look even more like an enraged, oversized flamingo. She pointed a quivering, accusatory finger towards my house, then up at Zippy, who was prudently gaining a little more altitude. "Arrest that man, Leo Maxwell! He's causing a public nuisance of catastrophic proportions. He's violated noise ordinances, FAA regulations I'm sure he doesn't have, and most importantly, direct orders from his Homeowners Association president. He's flying these things without a permit for Siren emulation." I decided this was probably my cue. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open my own front door and stepped onto my porch, hands held slightly out to my sides in the universal gesture of, "I'm unarmed and only moderately insane." "Officers!" I called out, trying to project my voice over the wind and Brenda's ongoing tirade. "Leo Maxwell, 121 Oak. There's an actual confirmed tornado bearing down on us. Like, right now. The official town siren was, experiencing some unforeseen technical difficulties." I shot a very deliberate, very pointed look directly at Brenda, who had the momentary decency to look slightly shifty before puffing up again. "My drones are just trying to give people a heads up." Officer Miller, bless his cynical, seen-it-all heart, didn't even glance at Brenda. His gaze was fixed on the churning sky, then on Howler, who was making a pass overhead. He turned to me. "Son," he said, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. "Are those flying contraptions yours?" "Yes, sir," I confirmed. "Custom-built, networked audio alert system." "And are they actually warning people about this tornado?" "Yes, sir. National Weather Service confirmed touchdown about 5 miles west of here, heading straight for us. Radar shows a debris ball and everything. It's the real deal." Officer Davis, meanwhile, was trying to placate Brenda, who was now attempting to physically hand him a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws, specifically opened to a page about aerial nuisances and unsanctioned projections. "Ma'am, with all due respect," Davis was saying, looking increasingly harried as a particularly large branch clattered down the street. "We have a confirmed, life-threatening weather emergency in progress. Perhaps the bylaws can wait." Brenda was aghast. "Wait, officer, the bylaws never wait. Section 4, subsection B, regarding aerial objects, clearly states that any device exceeding an altitude of 10 feet requires prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee, of which I am the chair, and his drones are projecting sound. That's Section 9, subsection D." Miller sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of every ridiculous suburban squabble he'd ever had to mediate. He rubbed his temples, then looked back at me. "All right, Maxwell. For now, keep 'em flying if they're actually helping people get to shelter. But you and I are going to have a long chat later about alternative notification systems and proper channels, and maybe your HOA president's definition of technical difficulties." He gave Brenda a look that could have curdled concrete. "Now, everyone who isn't already in a basement needs to get to one. Move!" The officers, to their credit, immediately switched into emergency mode, using their car's PA system to echo my drone's warnings and starting to go door to door for any houses that still looked occupied. Brenda, momentarily silenced by Miller's authority and the sheer absurdity of arguing bylaws during a tornado, just stood there sputtering, her laminated rule book drooping in the rain. Zippy, taking advantage of her distraction, did a cheeky little pirouette above her head before rejoining the warning pattern. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Phase 1 of Brenda's comeuppance was complete. Now for the main event, courtesy of Mother Nature. Amidst the escalating chaos, as neighbors I'd only ever exchanged curt nods with were now sprinting for their basements with a newfound appreciation for unsolicited aerial advice, a small but significant subplot was unfolding. One that I, in my role as chief drone wrangler and tornado announcer, was only peripherally aware of at the time, but which would have rather interesting repercussions later. You see, among Pleasant Valley's denizens were Dave Kowalski and Chuck the Chuckinator Willis. Dave and Chuck ran Storm Safe Solutions, a local company specializing in everything from reinforced garage doors to fancy lightning rods, and, their bestseller, basement storm shelters. They were solid, no-nonsense guys, the kind who knew their way around a concrete pour and a set of meteorological charts. They also happened to live 2 streets over, now about a month prior, during a brief lull in Brenda's reign of HOA terror. I think she was on a cruise, probably critiquing the ship's adherence to maritime law. I'd bumped into Dave at the hardware store. Full of caffeine and misguided optimism, I'd informally pitched him my drone swarm idea. "Imagine it, Dave," I'd said, gesticulating wildly with a length of PVC pipe I was buying for a new antenna mast. "Localized, targeted emergency alerts. Crowd management at the county fair. You could even use them to remind people about the bake sale at the community center. The possibilities are endless." Dave, a man whose idea of high-tech was a self-retracting tape measure, had listened politely, nodded, and then said something along the lines of, "Sounds a bit much, Leo. Who really needs a whole swarm of talking drones? We usually just use a bullhorn." Chuck, who I'd cornered later at the annual chili cook-off, my 5-alarm dragon's breath chili had failed to impress, unlike Brenda's suspiciously bland Mildred's mild delight, had been similarly skeptical. "Cool toys, kid. But for actual emergencies? Nah." Fast forward to the present. Dave and Chuck, having seen the sky turn the color of a week-old bruise and heard the increasingly insistent warnings from my cool toys, were now in their own front yard, not pitching shelters, but actually trying to secure their own outdoor furniture, which was threatening to achieve low Earth orbit. Through Valkyrie's camera, which was doing a sweep of their street, I caught a glimpse of them. They'd stopped wrestling with a rebellious patio umbrella and were both staring upwards, jaws slack, as Big Tony thundered past, bellowing, "Debris fall is possible! Stay away from windows!" The audio pickup on Valkyrie was surprisingly good, despite the wind. "You know," Dave yelled to Chuck over the wind's shriek and Big Tony's pronouncements, "that Maxwell kid, his crazy talking robot birds, they actually work. Did you hear the siren today?" Me neither. Chuck, a man not easily impressed, was slowly nodding, his eyes following Howler as it zipped past. No kidding. That HOA witch probably unplugged it. And this kid, this is better than that old relic anyway. You can actually understand what it's saying. He paused, a thoughtful expression dawning. Hey, remember he was trying to tell us about this? Drone-powered PA system or something? We kind of blew him off. Yeah, well, Dave grunted, yanking a rogue garden gnome back from the brink of airborne liberation. Maybe we should have taken that pitch a little more seriously. Imagine selling this to other towns, other HOAs. One's not run by, well, you know. He gestured vaguely in the direction of Brenda's house. This is one hell of a live demo, intentional or not. As they finally gave up on the furniture and made a dash for their own basement, Chuck looked back, caught Valkyrie's camera lens, and gave a quick, decisive thumbs up. I, hunched over my laptop in my rapidly darkening kitchen, the house groaning under the assault of the wind, saw that thumbs up. A tiny flicker of something warm pride, vindication, sparked in my chest. Well, look at that, Schrodinger, I murmured, as a particularly violent gust made the windows rattle like skeletal castanets. Accidental live demonstration for storm-safe solutions. If we survive this, maybe I can finally afford that new RTX 4090 graphics card, and a lifetime supply of antacids for dealing with Brenda. The thought was almost enough to make me forget the monster roaring its way towards us. Almost. The 10-minute warning had shrunk to 0 minutes. The relatively organized chaos of drone deployment and Brenda dodging gave way to the raw, elemental fury of the storm hitting us head-on. It wasn't a direct hit. The main vortex, a churning black pillar of hate, passed about a half-mile north of us, according to the later NWS reports. But we were definitely in the cheap seats, the part of the storm system where Mother Nature decided to redecorate with extreme prejudice. The roar was the first thing that hit you. Not the whistle of wind anymore, but a deafening, continuous freight train rumble that vibrated deep in your bones. My little house, which I'd always considered fairly sturdy, was groaning and popping like an old wooden ship in a hurricane. I'd retreated to my basement, a damp, spider-friendly space I usually avoided, armed with my laptop, a backup battery pack for it, and Schrodinger, who was now a furry, trembling ball crammed into his carrier, making tiny, protesting squeaks. "Hang in there, buddy," I told him, my voice barely audible over the din. Worst part should be over soon, probably. I wasn't entirely convinced myself. Skynet Light was still operational, though the drone feeds were becoming increasingly erratic. The wind speeds were off the charts. Screamy, caught in an updraft on the northern perimeter, was the first to go. His camera feed spun wildly, a kaleidoscope of green and gray, then fizzled into static with a final, mournful electronic chirp. "All right, Screamy," I muttered. "You screamed well." Valkyrie, battling valiantly over by Dave and Chuck's street, suddenly transmitted a horrifying close-up of a massive oak tree splitting in half, its ancient limbs crashing down right where Mr. Henderson usually parked his meticulously polished Buick. Then her signal, too, vanished. Big Tony, true to his robust nature, held on the longest. His camera showed a terrifying landscape of horizontal rain, flying debris. Was that someone's trampoline? And the eerie, sickly green glow of the sky. He even managed to capture a brief, blurry image of Brenda Jenkins' prized, overly manicured rose bushes being systematically stripped of every leaf and petal, then flattened as if by an invisible giant's boot. A small, dark part of me cheered. Then, with a squawk of distorted audio that might have been him trying to say, "I'm hit!" Big Tony went dark. Zippy and Howler were still transmitting, though their video was mostly just a blur of gray. I'd pulled them in closer, trying to keep them somewhat sheltered by the lee of buildings, but they were getting battered, Zippy's audio link crackled. "Warning, severe wind damage. Fifi. Fifi on the loose." Wait, what? Fifi? Brenda's precious poodle? I switched to Zippy's forward camera just in time to see a small, terrified, fluffy white shape shoot out from Brenda's back patio door, which was flapping wildly in the wind, clearly no match for the pressure. Fifi, looking more like a drowned rat than a prize-winning poodle, was scrambling madly across Brenda's ruined lawn, heading straight for Mr. Henderson's now open garage, the one where his Buick used to be before the oak tree decided to use it as a landing pad. The little furball dived into the relative safety of the garage, just as a section of Brenda's guttering peeled off her roof and speared the ground where Fifi had been moments before. "Well, I'll be," I said, a genuine laugh bubbling up despite the terror. "Even the dogs had enough of her." Then Howler's feed showed something that wiped the smirk off my face. Old Mrs. Gable, who lived at the end of my street and was at least 80, was struggling with a heavy wooden storm shutter on her front window. She was tiny, frail, and the wind was threatening to rip the shutter from her grasp. Officer Davis, who I'd last seen trying to reason with Brenda, was nowhere in sight. "Howler, get closer," I commanded into my headset mic. "Lights on full, audio max volume, repeat assistance needed at Gable residence." Howler, bless his little circuits, wobbled precariously but obeyed. He swooped lower, his bright LED strobes cutting through the gloom, his speaker blaring the new message. I saw Officer Davis, who had been helping someone else a few doors down, look up, spot Howler's frantic circling and strobing lights, and immediately sprint towards Mrs. Gable's house. He reached her just as the shutter was about to fly loose, helping her wrestle it into place. My heart, which had been trying to beat its way out of my ribcage, calmed a fraction. Okay, maybe these sky demons weren't so bad after all. The freight train roar began to recede, replaced by the slightly less terrifying sound of merely torrential rain and gale-force winds. The worst, it seemed, was over. The silence, when it finally came, was almost as jarring as the preceding roar. It was a dripping, sodden silence, punctuated by the distant wail of actual emergency sirens, the big, official kind, finally making their presence known, and the occasional thud of a falling branch. I gave it a good 10 minutes, listening to the rain slowly ease before cautiously cracking open the basement door. The air smelled of wet earth, pine needles, and ozone. Schrödinger, sensing the shift, uncurled himself and let out a tentative meow. "Yeah, buddy," I said, scooping him up. "I think we made it." Upstairs, my house was intact, though water was dripping from a couple of spots in the ceiling, and my prized collection of vintage sci-fi posters had taken a bit of a shower. Small price to pay. Outside, however, Pleasant Valley looked like it had hosted a heavyweight boxing match between a giant leaf blower and a vengeful god. Trees were down, fences were askew, and debris was everywhere. My drones, or what was left of them, were mostly grounded. Zippy had managed a controlled landing on my back patio, looking a bit worse for wear. Howler was perched on my roof, looking like a dejected metal bird. The others were MIA, presumed heroes. Neighbors began to emerge, looking dazed, pale, but overwhelmingly alive. And the first thing many of them did, after checking their own roofs, was look towards my house. Mr. Henderson, his face streaked with dirt, his prized Buick now sporting a very large oak branch where its windshield used to be, was one of the first. He trudged across his lawn, which now resembled a swamp. "Maxwell!" he called out, his voice hoarse. Those noisy damn things of yours. I was out here, trying to save the Buick's finish, when they started yelling about a tornado. Thought you were nuts, but then I saw the sky." He shook his head, looking at the wreckage of his car. "They probably saved my life. The car's a goner, but I'm here." He actually looked like he might clap me on the shoulder, but then seemed to think better of it. The Peterson twins, miraculously unharmed, ran up or, "Dude, that was awesome!" the older one yelled. "It was like a real-life video game. Can you make them say game over next time?" I managed a weak smile. "Working on it, kids?" Then I saw Brenda. She was standing on her porch, surveying the utter devastation of her award-winning garden. Her pink poncho was torn, her hair looked like she'd styled it with an egg beater, and her face was a mask of stunned disbelief. Fifi, remarkably, was trotting back across the lawn from Mr. Henderson's garage, looking surprisingly perky, and proceeded to lift her leg on what remained of Brenda's prize-winning piece rose. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Brenda saw me. Her mouth opened, probably to unleash a fresh torrent of by-law-related invective. But then she saw Mr. Henderson, giving me a grateful nod. She saw Mrs. Peterson hurry over to thank me, saying the drones had woken her napping husband just in time. She saw the growing crowd of neighbors, all looking at me with a mixture of awe and relief, her mouth closed. For once, Brenda Jenkins was speechless. Officer Miller, looking even more weary but with a strange new glint in his eye, trudged up my driveway. "Well, son," he said, pushing his rain-soaked cap back on his head, "you might have broken a few rules back there. Disturbing the peace, operating an unlicensed Sky PA. I'm sure Brenda here will give me a full list." He jerked a thumb towards Brenda, who was now just staring blankly at Fifi, desecrating her roses. "But damn if you didn't do some good today. A lot of good." He clapped me on the shoulder, this time for real. "We're going to need your official statement down at the station, and maybe a copy of the specs for that drone setup. Strictly for departmental research, you understand." He winked. A slow, tired, but genuine wink. "Looks like our official Siren is going to be out of commission for a while. Seems someone misplaced the key components." He gave a pointed look towards Brenda's toolbox, which was lying on its side by her porch, its contents spilled onto the wet concrete. The days that followed were a blur of insurance adjusters, chainsaw symphonies, and the surprisingly efficient camaraderie of a neighborhood picking itself up after a good scare. The legend of Drone Boy, or Tornado Leo, as the Peterson twins insisted on calling me, grew with each retelling. Brenda Jenkins's reign of terror ended not with a bang, but with a whimper and a leaked security camera video. The municipal shed, it turned out, had a discreet little camera pointed right at the Siren control panel. The footage, which mysteriously found its way onto the Pleasant Valley Community Facebook page, I plead the fifth, showed Brenda in her pink poncho, systematically pulling wires and flipping switches with the focused determination of a saboteur, occasionally consulting what looked like a hand-drawn diagram. The comments section was brutal. The HOA board, spurred by an avalanche of angry emails and the undeniable video evidence, convened an emergency Zoom meeting. Brenda's presidency was revoked so fast it probably gave her whiplash. She resigned from the board entirely the next day, citing unforeseen personal commitments and a sudden desire to explore minimalist living in a community with fewer auditory distractions. Last I heard, Fifi had indeed decided Mr. Henderson's less manicured but far more stable garage was her preferred residence. Henderson didn't seem to mind. He said Fifi was better company than his late Buick, anyway. As for me, Leo Maxwell, reluctant hero and operator of Sky Demons, I had to give a lot of statements. The local paper ran a small, slightly sensationalized piece. "Local hobbyists' drone swarm saves town after Siren sabotage." They even used a picture of me looking particularly windswept and heroic, which I immediately framed. "Yeah, well," I told the earnest young reporter who interviewed me, trying to inject my usual sarcasm but failing to hide a grin. When the official noisemaker decides to take an unscheduled vacation, sometimes you gotta improvise with your own private fleet of flying shouty bots. Just glad everyone's okay, mostly, though I think a few garden gnomes achieved escape velocity. The best part? Dave Kowalski and Chuck the Chuckinator Willis from StormSafe Solutions showed up on my doorstep a week later, not with a cease and desist, but with a business proposal, a serious one. "Leo," Dave said, shaking my hand firmly. "We were fools. Complete, utter, storm-ignorant fools. That drone system of yours, it's not just cool toys. It's revolutionary for localized alerts, emergency comms, heck, even for finding lost pets, apparently." He winked, referencing Fifi's adventure. Chuck nodded enthusiastically. "We want to partner with you. We've got the installation know-how, the contacts with municipalities, the insurance. You've got the brains and the drones. We can refine this, make it even better, and market it. There are 1,000 little towns out there with aging sirens and overzealous HOA presidents. This could be huge." And so, Phoenix Drone Systems, because, rising from the near disaster, was born. Our first contract, Pleasant Valley. The town council, after publicly apologizing for the unforeseen siren malfunction, voted unanimously to fund a brand new, state-of-the-art, Brenda-proof emergency alert system, designed, installed, and maintained by yours truly and my new business partners. We even integrated a feature to send a polite text alert to residents before the siren test, just to be considerate. Life in Pleasant Valley settled into a new normal. The scars on the landscape were healing, and the scars on the community psyche were too. The new HOA president was a mild-mannered accountant named Herb, who mostly just wanted people to pay their dues on time and was terrified of technology more advanced than his pocket calculator. Sometimes on a quiet Saturday morning, I'd launch a single drone zippy, now fully repaired and upgraded, and let him do a peaceful circuit over the neighborhood. I'd sit on my porch, sipping my paint-stripping coffee, Schrödinger purring on my lap. "You know, buddy," I'd muse, watching Zippy glide through the clear blue sky. Brenda jamming that siren might just have been the best career move I never actually made. Schrödinger would just blink, then go back to his nap. But the real victory, the true cherry on top of the whole chaotic, terrifying, surprisingly lucrative Sunday. No more emails about Fifi's delicate sensibilities. No more passive-aggressive newsletters about aesthetic harmony. That, my friends, was true tranquility. The kind you can only appreciate after you've stared down a tornado with nothing but a laptop, a couple of yappy drones, and a whole lot of audacious nerve. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally saved up enough for that RTX 4090.